Good morning, everybody. I'm really glad that we could gather this panel this morning. Sitting here in Northern Virginia, or sitting here, I should say, in the Washington, D.C. area, I'm a part of Northern Virginia, a big part of Washington Metro, a big part of, if you've ever heard of the $40 tolls. There's just a lot of different things that are going on in regards to revenue. And so I'm really delighted that in the world of transit here today that we've brought together 4 senior leaders who are really doing innovative things in their community. And a big part of what we want to do this morning is really hear their conversation, ask the questions. We're going to try to keep this fairly unstructured because really it is about, I used to say it was about a mosaic or about a jigsaw puzzle, but I think it's a little bit more of a Rubik's Cube in the way we all need to put our funding together. Because we need to understand we all live in a world where the needs are always going to outstrip the supply of revenues. And I know here at APTA, and I've been involved in APTA for, might be close to 20 years now, we're always talking about the role of federal transit dollar. But all of us know who are in the operating side of things, that's one part, a really, really important part. But it's only one part of that funding strategy. I know I live in a world where we have a number of local and state representatives who've signed no tax pledges. And then also we're seeing changes in fare box recovery. So the reality is that all of us are facing a way that we need to get innovative both on the funding side, but also then how we use those revenues. How can we streamline costs? What are ways that we can do that? And so again, this morning's session is really about telling that story from across the country and what have you, because I think I think we can all learn from each other. And I think it's amazing where a lot of us are hesitant to think about doing something. For example, we are funding transit capital and operations using toll revenues. Some folks are like, wow, you're doing that. Yeah, we are, because we needed the money, we need to move more people, and that's one way to do it, using the hot lanes around the DC area. So I'm really delighted here. There are bios on that wonderful little app. I'm not going to give everybody's bio. You guys probably already know all these people. We've got Dave Genova from RTD in Denver. Happy to have him here. Lots of great things going on. I know when I was at FTA, all of the Eagle P3 stuff was always at the front of us. Donna DiMartino, who's at San Joaquin Regional Transit District, is again doing some fantastic things about way the things are going there, even after some of the things that she's done in the greater area with contracts and what have you. So a lot of interesting things happening there in that greater area. Joe Aiello, working up in Massachusetts Bay, MBTA, on the control board. I know with our metro world, we looked a lot to what was going on up in Boston with the T. So a lot of different things that are going on, both in terms of the revenue side, but as well as the cost control side. And last but definitely not least, Rob Gannon from King County, bring up the West Coast. A lot of great things that are happening out there under his leadership, including being considered moving to this thing called the Mobility Agency. And there's some fabulous social media on that. So again, we want to keep this really informal. So if I could perhaps just start with you, Dave, just sort of tell your story. We'll go across and then we'll open it up for questions. So start thinking of them. So great.
Thank you, Kate. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. I'll tell just a little bit of a background as by way of kind of introducing some of the Denver story that I think is pertinent to the conversation today. So in about the mid-90s, we opened our first light rail line, and then we were engaged in our current general manager and leadership at the time was really engaged in expanding our transit system, had a great vision. We went out for a sales tax initiative in about 1998 called Guide the Ride. It was not successful, but we learned some things through that that we were able to take another run at it a few years later and then be successful in 2004 when we were able to pass our Fast Tracks program, which was a sales tax increase to our already sales tax. So that was a very important step for us, and it was important, even though that one attempt was not successful, we learned a lot about that, about why we weren't successful so we could be successful the next time. Then in 2001, as part of the vision that our general manager and board had at the time, we acquired Denver Union Station. And so this in itself, the fact that the transit agency was acquiring the Union Station, the historic building, and 19 acres around the historic building, it was all rail yards, vacant property, a part of downtown that was not developed, nor did you go to. But it was very controversial for us at the time for RTD to be involved in the purchase of this property. We bought it for about $49 million, and then I'll talk more about DUS a little bit later. We had a few partners in that. The city of Denver was involved, our state highway department, and then our state transportation department, and then also our Dr. Cog. So the vision was to truly turn that Union Station into a multimodal hub and develop around that, and we've really realized it today. So fast forward to 2004, that's when our fast track sales tax initiative passed. And this initiative, what we said we were going to do is do a bunch of build out of different technology and different corridors in a 12-year period. So by 2016, we would have almost a $5 to $6 billion investment in transit infrastructure done. And I remember talking to our general manager at the time thinking that's quite aggressive. But one thing I've learned about leadership from him and other leaders that have mentored me is we need to be bold in our vision and in what we want to try to accomplish. Then shortly after that, of course, you all know, so here we get this great sales tax initiative passed. We're going to build out all of this infrastructure. That's in 2004. Then 2007, 2008 hits, and we're in the midst of the Great Recession. And so we had the perfect storm hit us in terms of a huge decrease in revenue because our revenue is largely sales tax based. So huge reduction in revenue, and at the same time, cost of construction going up. So our project estimates had changed, and we were really, really in trouble about how are we going to deliver this Fast Tracks program that our stakeholders just passed a couple years ago. So a few things that happened there. In 2007, you may recall, the Federal Transit Administration did a pilot project called the PENTA-P. It's the Public-Private Partnership Pilot Program. So PENTA-P from now on. I won't say all that again. And so FTA put this out as, is our P3s a good model for delivering transit projects? Let us do some pilots and see how this could work. So we talked to our board of directors about it, educated, informed them on P3s. We threw our hat in the ring, and we were selected as one of those pilot programs, and that is what Kate referred to earlier as what we call our Eagle P3 project, and I'll talk a little bit more detail about that later. So that was kind of that's how we got into it. So we found ourselves in a very challenging situation. We saw opportunity with the PENTA-P program. We jumped in with both feet. Now, we were comfortable doing that because we'd had a lot of design build experience in delivering rail infrastructure, and then we've also contracted out a lot of bus services. So we felt like we had a lot of good building blocks to be able to take that step. But we did bring on specialists to help us, and maybe we'll get into that more in Q&A. About the same time, we selected a master developer for the Denver Union Station area and environs. And this was done through a wide community engagement. And it was a great thing to do because what we were able to do in combination with the master developer was make sure that while we were getting all the transit investment and the transit infrastructure built, we were doing it in a way that also helped to try to maximize the development that could happen then around Union Station in concert or in conjunction with the transit infrastructure. So really two big P3s, the Eagle project, and then with our historic station, we also entered into another P3, and this was controversial at the time. So we had this beautiful, big, historic facility. What do we do with it in terms of bringing it back to its glory and restoring it? So we put out an RFP, and we had two teams propose, and the team we selected said, we're going to gut that whole historic building, turn it into a boutique hotel, put first floor retail in, and do all this work. And so it was controversial because, number one, this is a historic asset. It's a public asset. And so how are we going to do all this and honor that process? But we were able to get through that. And we call that a P3 because the investment that was done in that was done largely by the private sector to do all of that work with the historic building. We had some investment in it. And then we have a long-term lease with them now, about a 99-year lease if you add up all the options. One of the great things on that is Union Station property. Many of you have probably been there and see it. It's way ahead of its pro forma on financial performance. And so we get a revenue share every year when they hit a certain threshold in their retail environment and the hotel sales and all of that. So if you're at Denver, go to Union Station, buy beers at the terminal bar because we get a cut on that. Anyway, so we get after a certain threshold, we get a revenue trigger on that project. So really, it's kind of the tale of two P3s in Denver. Very interesting, very different projects. And again, I would say in the P3 realm, sometimes people talk about P3s in terms of funding. It's really more they're financing vehicles predominantly and not funding vehicles. But we were able to do both of those projects, the big commuter project through the Eagle P3 and the redevelopment of Union Station through those P3 tools. And then, of course, one of the huge benefits now is we estimate that there's about $5 to $6 billion worth of private development now that has happened around Union Station because of the transit investment. So I talk about those things because I think when people talk about public transit, everyone wants to just talk about ridership, but we bring so much more value to our communities than just the transportation we provide, and that's the economic development that is driven by TOD. So I'll stop there and we'll come back to questions later.
Donna.
Well, thank you. I'm Donna DiMartino, San Joaquin Regional Transit District, and thank you, Dave. You brought up some very good examples. I remember a few years ago, Gary Thomas, when he was the chair, he talked about public transit just doesn't get people to work, but we put people to work as well. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, our story is very different than Denver. People say, well, where is San Joaquin County? And I'll let you know, it's just south of Sacramento, just inland from the Bay Area. We provide commuter services to both Sacramento and the Bay Area. But our center is Stockton. And if you think about Stockton, California, most of you probably go right to thinking about bankruptcy, foreclosure. I mean, we're the epicenter of the crisis. And the recession was really, really difficult on us. We also lost a large amount of money, about 25% of our operating budget we lost in 2007 and 8, and had a huge impact. We were already struggling to provide service to a very large geographic area. Our service area is over 1,400 square miles. So we have cities, but we also have a lot of rural and agricultural area as well. Stockton was hit hard by the recession, and I was thinking about leveraging resources, assets, but I would like to talk about how we leveraged bad situations into good outcomes. And so some of the bad situations we were facing were that we were already a disadvantaged community. Our community was in distress. Our unemployment rate hit 20%. And we have terribly poor air quality as well. So we have, over the last 10 years, been able to leverage federal and state grants. We've got California Energy Commission, congestion management, air quality, a lot of federal grants, about $175 million. That may not seem like a lot to the big agencies, but to Stockton, California, that's a lot of money. We've brought in about $175 million into our community. We built a downtown transit center, took over a whole block of downtown Stockton. We built a regional operations center, a $52 million project that will allow us to expand for decades to come. We've put in 5 bus rapid transit lines. People said, bus rapid transit in Stockton, that's kind of silly, but it's really been a home run in our community. We've brought in hybrid electric vehicles and now all electric vehicles. And it was by cobbling partnerships and bringing people together. And I'm not ashamed to, check the box, disadvantaged community, poor air quality, and to use those to, bring resources to our community. So we've been able to make investments in our community that will serve that community for decades to come. We were able to provide jobs at a time when jobs were really important and needed in our community. And with those assets, we've been able to leverage other things. I hope that we can talk about a little bit of mobility management. I think we've had some innovative mobility management opportunities as well. But with that, I think I'm going to stop and pass it on to the other panelist.
Thank you. I'm Joe Aiello at the MBTA. I'll begin at 2015. Some of you may remember a nasty winter up in the Northeast. The Boston area was hit with multiple blizzards, record snow. The system failed to operate. Not only did it fail to operate, it took the system about 4 months to fully recover. This is a place where snow should not be a surprise. And the underlying reason for the failure should not have been a surprise to anybody in the community, because there had been voices of concern over the years about the level of disinvestment in the system. So in 2015, newly elected Governor Baker, with the legislature, decided to dismantle the governance structure that oversaw the Transit Authority and create a 5-year fiscal and management control board, of which I was fortunate enough to, I don't know, fortunate or unfortunate enough to be asked to serve as chairperson. So there's 5 volunteer members, and our mission from the governor and from the legislature was very simple. Fix the T, don't ask for any more money. So pretty good.
Easy.
What had been happening is that the T had a series of formula sources of revenue that were coming into it, and 2 years before the big snowstorms, it had pierced an operating budget right through those funding availabilities, went petitioned the legislature, asked for supplemental resources, received $186 million of an appropriation in that year. And when we showed up, we were in the process of inherited a request for another 190 something. I mean, they were growing at a deficit of 5.25% compounded growth in the operating budget with no increase in revenue at the time. So the first step we took was to tell the legislature, give us what you gave us last year. We don't need more than that. We will stop that at the $186 million level. We had to move pretty quickly. We had to look at sort of what were some of the vulnerabilities, both in terms of cost savings as well as revenue opportunities. One area that we recognized very quickly is we were leaking about $50 million in unpaid revenues. Why do we have unpaid revenues? Because we're using a lot of cash. Buses crowded, like rail vehicles crowded, especially around where the colleges are. Operators with pressure to stay on schedule, open up all the doors, hope and assume that people would come in and pay their fare box at the front end. Never happens. Commuter rail system, similarly, had grown dramatically. We still had operators on board, walking up and down, trying to collect fares from folks, not able to get through the number of trains to be able to collect them. And the fare gates that we had in the rapid transit system underground continuously defaulting to open because we were using an old, aged technology. We didn't have the IT folks internally to be able to deal with that stuff. So we said immediately, let's bring on and fast track a new fare collection technology. Let's expand it so we go to cashless. By the way, we can have a whole conversation about the measures we're taking to be able to continue to serve the unbanked. That's a very real problem that we're struggling with. And we went to a public-private partnership competition. And the notion was we wanted to say to the private sector, you need to make sure that the fare technology can apply to everything. Commuter rail, which the old technology did not. Buses, like rail at surface. You can open up all doors, board on multiple doors, have a system that allowed multiple forms of payment that doesn't include cash, so we can minimize the dwell time at any particular station. But you also have to run this at and I may have the number wrong because we have a couple of standards, but let's see it. So you tell me, about a 96% uptime performance. So we put that out to bid. We're delighted that Cubic was the winner. That project is now in implementation. By 2020, we're going to have that system beginning to get fully deployed. It will be fully deployed by 2022. That is going to give us, by that time, we believe about a $50 million uplift. So that's downstream that we have to deal with. In the short term, we've taken a couple of other measures. One was, as we looked around the system, we looked at our advertising revenue. We still had the old-fashioned billboards where people would put up news signs for Frank Sinatra CDs or whatever people are trying to sell. The difficult thing, even in a large agency, is the procurement people have to be masters of the universe of such a wide variety of things. How do you buy a vehicle? How do you do a P3 implementation? And how do you think about advertising revenue, right? It's a very difficult thing. So we brought in an outside consultant that helped us. We decided we wanted to go to aggressively digital format. We now have a growing digital screen advertisement where we reserve a lot of time to be able to provide information directly to customers. But what we're seeing now is an incredibly rich uplift in revenues. We've been experiencing about a 15% compounded year-on-year. We're now into the third year increase in advertising revenues as we put more screens up. And by the way, the screens themselves are paid for by the vendor. We expect to continue to have that double-digit growth. So we can talk about a lot more types of things that we've been doing. And happy to say we have bent the cost curve. We had, without cutting an hour of service, and in fact adding some service, we actually bent the cost curve down in terms of what we need to ask the legislature down to a negative, and we're using that a good chunk in the last fiscal year. We used the entire $186 million of supplemental funds, and we put it into our capital reinvestment program because we have about a $10 million backlog in state of good repair. So we're trying to use every dollar we can find for that. So I'll stop talking and pass it over.
Thanks, Joe. I feel like the fraud on the stage, so I'm just going to acknowledge that right at the outset, that the things that we are leveraging at King County Metro in the Seattle area are not really innovative. What we're leveraging, at least in this moment, is the success of our region, the support of a transit system, and good investment that is trailing many, many years from when it should have been brought to the region. So to be specific, King County Metro is funded primarily through sales tax, and with a robust economy in the Seattle area, we have really ample funding to continue to invest in service. So that's the first thing we're trying to leverage, is delivering those investments in a way that continue not just to sustain the system, but grow it and grow it where it needs to meet the economic development needs of the region. We had a $54 billion rail package pass recently, and that is great news for the region, but it should have been passed and put in place 35 years ago. So as our rail system catches up, the other great advantage that Metro has, not only operating that rail system, but delivering near-term service while we wait for the rail structure to arrive. So that puts greater demand on our transit system, and it makes opportunities for us to do bus-rail integration in meaningful ways, but also in creative ways where those two have not been brought together before. We have a long-range plan that we're leveraging, right? It calls for us to double our transit service by 2040 because 1 million more people are going to descend upon our region. So we're using that as leverage to say, at any opportunity, how can we invest where communities need the transit service, and what sort of partnerships can be available? So really, in the midst of all these great examples, we are cobbling together many similar things, but we're really just racing to keep up with all the growth that is occurring around us. And that is our big leverage point. We are selling properties to develop revenue streams, but we're not doing that in the scale of Union Station. We are looking to cut costs, but really it's cut costs in one area to reinvest where more efficient service can be delivered. And as Kate mentioned at the outset, we're trying to define what mobility can mean to a region that has all this economic growth, where new arrivers are saying, we don't want to own cars, we want to take a public transportation system. There is no stigma attached with our bus system, so how do we make that more relevant to a new generation of riders? At the same time, we can't send big 60-foot buses into every neighborhood, so we have pilot programs. We're launching 7 different pilots over the course of the next 6 to 8 months, testing opportunities with microtransit, with TNCs, with more efficient delivery mechanisms to park and rides. So we're trying to do many, many things at one time rather than leveraging one singular big opportunity. So that's maybe where I'll stop.
Well, it's fantastic, because I think it's a perfect segue where I wanted to go next, which is really, is that leveraging, whether it be mobility management in general, but also those partnerships with some of the TNCs and others. And Donna, do you want to start off that conversation? Sort of, how are you partnering to provide, either with a TNC or whatever, to provide mobility management, or maybe looking at things that may not be covered by a fixed route service? Do you want to start that conversation?
Thank you. We serve, as I said, a very large geographic area, and we've, through the years, tried to figure out how to provide service in areas where we heard from speakers before where you just can't justify putting fixed route service. So we've done several things, and we have a partnership with Uber, and whereby we subsidize rides that are either outside of our service area or after hours, and those rides will connect to public transit. We just kicked off our own Uber-type service. We're calling it Van Go. We're making a play on that. They're brightly colored red vehicles with Van Go prints on the outside. And, in many communities, people are afraid to ride Uber. We don't have a lot of Uber service in our community, and people are afraid because of the stories they've heard about riding on an Uber, but also many of our Uber vehicles are not accessible. So with our Van Go service, we are able to do that. So we have the partnership with Uber as well as our own Van Go service. I did want to share something, maybe the rest of you are doing something similar, but one of the projects that we've had that's been great is a partnership for ADA service. So I want to start out by saying that I'm part of the American Bus Benchmarking Group. If you don't know what that is, there are about 20 of us who have partnered together. We've been working together to collect data, to analyze the data, and then to share it so that we can use it for performance measurements. And last year, when we took a look at the ridership on our ADA services, it's about 3%. The cost, 16% of our budget. Huge disparity there. So as we're introducing mobility management, and I talked with a few other managers I know in my organization, when I say, let's try this, people say, where are we going to get the money, Donna? Where are we going to get the money? And I'd like to say that if we do it right, these new mobility management initiatives not only will help our communities, but will help our bottom line as well and help us to be better. I think there's a good business case for that. One of the things that we have done, we have the United Cerebral Palsy in Stockton. I know they're in many, many cities, and they were the largest users of our services. And it was really tough because you've got those big demands in the morning and the afternoon, all these people who need to be on your ADA service. So we worked with them, and we actually developed a contract with them. We gave them vehicles. We maintain those vehicles, we fuel those vehicles, and we even help them with driver training. But they hired their own people to operate the vehicles. So those trips that used to cost us $53, and I know many of you identify with that and even more for the cost of an ADA trip, those trips now cost us $5 a trip. So they get better service, they've got our vehicles to use throughout the day. The drivers of the vehicles are very, very aware of the specific needs of those customers, and it just works out all the way around. That's all the good news. The bad news is we can't count them on our NTD. So I mentioned that yesterday in the coordinating council. We're being invited to introduce new mobility ideas, and how are we going to capture those in the NTD moving forward? So,
Other partnerships with TNCs or others? Can I speak to it all?
Well, we actually copied Donna, and we're now using the TNCs for a portion of our ride, which was increasing in cost by 10% compounded a year. Because of increased demand and increased underlying costs. Happy to say that about 15% is a choice that we give to consumers, those who can use a non-ADA accessible vehicle. Now about 15% of our customers are using them, and again, we get the same cost savings. So although the good news is that our ADA ridership continues to grow, we've been somewhat flatlined on our budget. So it's been a really great cost saver for us, as well as an additional choice for our customers. So sometimes it's good to watch other people and what they're doing and then just copy them, and
That's
we
why
were
we're here.
delighted to watch that experience.
Good. Dave or Bob?
Well, I'll jump in. So we've doing a variety of different things, and one of the things that we have done is kind of copy APTAs, and we agree with the model of the transit agency being the mobility integrator. So we hosted a mobility summit in Denver in September. We had about 120 people attend, and really our vision behind this is to really be leading the regional mobility strategy discussion, because we're sensing a lot of pressure amongst local cities and counties to try to start filling in gaps where they perceive where either we're not meeting those needs or we can't meet those needs. And so one of my big concerns around that is that, number one, those problems that are perceived aren't being properly analyzed to determine what the problem actually is, and therefore what's the right solution. And I think we heard the opening speaker a couple days ago, and I won't be able to say it like he did. He talked about the fetishization of technology, right? And so everyone wants the latest thing, so let's just put it out there, but let's be smart about how we're doing this. So we're really trying to lead that dialogue now, meaning that we obviously we can't do everything, and not that we should do everything, but let's be smart about how we do it. Let's integrate all those services. One other thing I'll mention quickly is that we've been operating a microtransit on-demand like service for about 2 decades, and we call it Call and Ride right now. And so we have about 56 cutaways in our fleet, and we operate these in about 21 different areas within our 2,400 square mile operating areas. So we've been slowly making improvements in those call and ride services, and next month we're going to roll out our rebranding of that service. It's going to be called Flex Ride. It's the same cutaway, the same contractors that provide the service. We're going to have a technology app layover where we're going to try to bring the scheduling of those services down to about 10 minutes or less. And so this is something we're trying to really educate and inform our stakeholders about, because they hear about different things that different agencies and different cities are doing, but they're not really recognizing, hey, we're actually doing this right here, in your backyard. It's just a matter of being aware of this. And actually, out of the summit, I actually had some of our transportation management associations come back and contact us and said, hey, we were looking at contracting with somebody else for this service, but you showed us what you're doing with FlexRide. Could you provide these services for us under that FlexRide service that you're getting ready to roll out? So, and then I'll just say that obviously we're working on different kinds of pilots with TNCs and stuff, but lots of pushback. We just had about 200 people show up at a board committee meeting 2 weeks ago in mobility devices, and the issue around accessibility of those services. So both physical accessibility, banking, technology. So we all know there's a lot of barriers around that, and I think the challenge is how do we break down those barriers and do what we do.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So one of the things that we are trying to leverage, and perhaps unsuccessfully at the early stage, but we know we have to do it, is our relationship with organized labor and ATU specifically. So like Dave, we hosted a mobility summit in the Seattle region and got great participation from many stakeholder groups, except for labor. And then we hosted a separate labor forum to invite ATU in to hear about the long-term strategy, to hear about our challenges in a very direct way, and to really lay bare what we meant by mobility and how it was not designed to take away jobs from bus operators, light rail operators, mechanics, et cetera, but quite the opposite. How do we build the system and build it with them? And that has been a very difficult conversation to have with ATU. Way out in the progressive corner of the United States in the Northwest, even when they hear and listen to us, the local, they still receive tremendous amounts of pressure from other areas of the country, and they're very resistant to even the notion, excuse me, that new mobility solutions could be done in conjunction with labor in an effort to grow the system, which ultimately means growing ATU jobs or other labor jobs.
And I really appreciate, because I wanted to talk about the concept of contracting out and the opportunities and the challenges, again, going from sort of the local experience, a lot of conversations related to controlling costs at Metro, and we're the funders of Metro in Virginia. And we basically, our General Assembly has said that the operating subsidies from Virginia can't increase by more than 3% from one year to the next. But the collective bargaining agreement doesn't exactly fit within that. Virginia is a right-to-work state. My General Assembly members really don't care. So I'd love to hear, I think that especially in the world of trying to contract out, the dynamic, how do you work with labor? How do you put these things through? If I could start with you, Joe, because I think Boston and all the things that you guys are doing, I'm sure that's probably right front and center to your activities.
Sure. We're a heavily unionized organization, 6,000 employees. I think we have an executive group of just under 200 people. Mm-hmm. So law department, everybody is unionized. That's sort of the culture that we all grew up in. What we tried to do is to try to figure out how to deal with labor to make sure that we understood the kinds of things that were important to them, but also what was important to us. So without going to the details of how we got there, we basically gave them a long-term deal where they have some protection. We got a series of concessions in terms of the levels of compensation as you move through the system to try to slow down the acceleration of earnings over time. We got a couple of concessions around retirement, but with stabilization of a consistent commitment to the pension system. What we were able to extract out of that is that we now have on the property for the first time a part of our bus system is privately operated. So they're running on MBTA buses with an MBTA fare structure. The only thing that's different to the customer is the bus is driven and maintained by a private sector company, fully unionized. So we have unionized operators, unionized contractors. That's the direction we want to go in for one particular reason, beyond just the savings, right? And our savings, that we can operate that service all in at about 50% of what our base system is. It wasn't necessarily to sort of poke an eye into unions, but the arbitration process in Massachusetts is you take Party A's or Party B's proposal, and one wins, the other one doesn't. And the T, for the last 20 years, has been on the losing end of the arbitration. The union has gotten effectively what they've asked for. Unsustainable. We now have evidence that we can provide to arbitrators that say, if you want to start thinking about what is market here are unionized machinists, and here are unionized operators doing the same exact work as our folks there, and we think that that's going to have some downward pressure on future awards or future collective bargaining agreements. Our ability to extract that, we think, will have long-term benefits on cost control.
But we do a large amount of contracting on the bus side, and how it started in Denver was our state legislature several decades ago created a new law for us that said we actually had to contract out a minimum percentage of our rubber tire service. So I think it started as we had to contract out at least 20% of our service. So that's kind of how contracting started for us. Now we have that legislation, you can imagine, has changed over time. Now it's more of a ceiling, like we can't go above, I think it's 57%, and this is just our rubber tired side. It doesn't apply to rail at all. So right now we contract out right around 55–56% of our rubber tire service. So all of our paratransit, so our Access-a-Ride and then that call-and-ride service I talked about is contracted out, and then probably 40% or so of our fixed route bus is contracted out. Now that's amongst several companies. We go out for RFPs every 5 years. They're all organized, so they're all unionized by the same union that we have under different bargaining agreements. It's less costly for us to operate that. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. They pay a little bit less for labor. Interesting thing, just this year, like everybody, we have a severe shortage of operators. And as we were going through our renegotiation of the collective bargaining agreement, we did about an 8 to 10% increase across the board for the first year for operators and maintainers. So then our private operators said, you're going to kill us because we're already paying a little bit less. So one of the things that we did take to our board is we said we think it's fair to do an adjustment to those contracts, and I can't remember, we raised them by a little bit, not like that full 8%, but what we negotiated with the private carriers was we'll do this for you, but that money, that increase has got to go towards wages for your operators. It can't go to anything else.
If I could maybe give one more example of sort of how we've partnered with the private sector. One of the things we discovered, and it really was a mechanic that came to the board one day and said, I'm sick and tired of you guys picking on the machinists and our lack of productivity in some of our garages. He said, let me tell you what I experienced. And he began to tell us a story that he would show up on a Monday morning and he would have a bus scheduled to bring into the bay that was supposed to have 3 things fixed on it. He would discover that something else was broken. He would go to the cage where the local parts are held in the garage and say, I need an X. The X wasn't there. It needed to be in the central depot where all the parts are coming. He said, I don't get that part until Thursday. And so therefore, I bring that bus out. We have to do a workaround. And whereas I could do 5 things if all the parts were there and immediately available, I'm probably doing 3 things. We looked at that system. It was a completely dysfunctional system, not because of anybody's problem, but we had different departments in the T. Someone was responsible for the central warehouse, the management of the building. Someone was responsible for ordering the spare parts. Someone else was responsible for transportation, moving things back and forth. People were on limited shifts, and so every department was trying to minimize their budget, but no one was looking at the entire operational sequence. We found that we had spare parts that were sitting in the storehouse for buses that we no longer used because someone had got an idea that we could buy volume but was not talking to the bus procurement people about the fact that that was going to be a part that was going to be basically unwound in terms of its necessity. We're now saving $10 million a year in our outsourced distribution warehouse, and our productivity in the garages has picked up by about 4%. So we're saving on both ends, just sort of thinking about operations analysis and how we might produce a better product. And the machinists were very thankful for that. And by the way, they organized, after the vendor came in, they organized the workforce there. And so again, it's a union workforce working on the private sector incentives. They have to live within a window of having a minimum spare part ratio, but no more than a maximum spare part ratio. And if they don't do that, they face severe penalties. So it's working pretty well.
So I want to jump back to the revenue side of things, and I guess I'm sort of sitting here jealously with the King County example that you guys are doing great on revenue, and that's fantastic. Of course, there was a little bit of talk about real estate, value capture, and all those sorts of things. I'd love to hear a little bit from you, from each of you, about how you are, or maybe what are the challenges associated with getting revenue value capture out of either your own real estate or some joint ventures type of thing. And obviously, you've got some real estate things that are going on. Do you want to talk about challenges and opportunities there?
I will. Thank you. Yeah, I'll start. I'll start it off because it's an interesting area, and I'll start off with, with the various properties that we own. It's very interesting. We kind of have a mixed perspective on our board about what we do with properties. So there's some perspective that says if it's a property we're not using it, we should just sell it, get it off our books, take the money. Then there's a perspective that says we need to leverage. We never sell the property, keep it as long as we can, leverage it in some way where we can capture value out of it. So we are looking for those kinds of opportunities through transit-oriented development and other things, but we are very limited by what we can do. So both in terms of the federal rules, right, and then also in Colorado our own state rules. So every piece of property that we acquire for transit, we acquire it as if we would ultimately have to go through the eminent domain process. Not that we do that often or all the time, but we just follow that process. So if we have to, we're covered. But in Colorado, it says that we can only acquire property for a transit use. So it's very specific. So we can't acquire more than what we need to accomplish the transit piece. Or if we do, buy something and then want to do something development-wise with another organization, we have to be really cautious about those rules around acquisition. But that said, we are trying to be very creative in terms of development around stations. We have a lot of TOD going on, but also as far as how to do joint development where we could maybe maintain ownership of the property and just receive some kind of, whether it's a lease payment or rent payment or something like that. But that's kind of my perspective.
Oh, that's great. Donna, have you worked much in leveraging real estate or joint development type of things around your station?
Not real estate, but
Yeah.
I would like to bring up two examples, and it goes back to the union example we talked about. We contract out about 40% of our service, and we have a constant conflict with our ATU employees about that. And then as we've introduced Uber subsidies in our VanGo service, which we operate through our contractor, just a lot of pushback. But one of the things that we've been able to do to provide more union jobs is on the maintenance side. So we have this new state-of-the-art facility. We have very well-skilled and trained mechanics. And we started reaching out to, first of all, our health and human service partners. We found that many of them had vehicles, but they couldn't maintain them. They didn't have the ability, so now we maintain those vehicles for them. In addition, our county prisoner transport vehicles are big MCIs. Well, we own and operate and maintain MCIs, so our mechanics are able to maintain those as well. And now the State Department of Corrections has joined on as a contractor with us, and they're actually bringing their vehicles to us, their big buses, and we're maintaining those as well. So this is an opportunity to make a little revenue, but to make, to actually create more union jobs in our environment. The other thing that we've all been talking about is partnerships. And yesterday during a panel, Art Gazzetti stood up and asked us, okay, as we talk about mobility initiatives, I've got this list, do you have any other ideas? And I was thinking, Ed Benning gave us a really good example yesterday of partnerships he has in his community. And I think we can all learn from those partnerships. I talked about our partnership with United Cerebral Palsy, but how brilliant is it that Ed is able to bring critical, essential services to his community and get other people to pay for it. So, how do we develop those kinds of partnerships? I think that's really brilliant. And Art, I'd like to add that to the list, developing partnerships to help us pay for the services that we are providing in our community. And we've got health, human service, education, business members, counties, cities. One thing that we've done, when we went through the recession, Stockton Unified School District was hit really hard as well. And so they were operating their yellow school buses, and you operate a bus, you pick kids up in the morning, you take them home at night. Well, they came to us and worked with us and said, we'd like to stop operating yellow school bus services, but instead buy passes. So now they don't operate high school transportation services, they buy passes. All those students are riding on our buses, and not only do they get to and from school, but they have the opportunity to stay for after-school programs, they have mobility options, and I hope we're training a whole new generation of transit users and supporters. But again, a way to enhance revenue for us.
That's great.
So,
Big program going.
yeah, this is a long story in a short time frame, but I want to illustrate that selling property and creating a revenue stream is good, but it also has its consequences for transit. So in the middle of downtown Seattle, we have a joint operation bus and rail tunnel. We sold one of our stations to the State Convention Authority and created this tremendous revenue stream, $275 million spread over 32 years. Really great, right? It plugs a hole. At the same time, it forces 520 buses out of a dedicated right-of-way underground onto the surface streets. So we need to leverage, as transit agencies, the use of our property even when we sell it and try and get back the public benefit or the transit right-of-way or something that continues to advance the cause of public transportation. So that actually has a happy ending in that I think everybody in the room knows that Seattle is the greatest hockey town in the United States. So as Seattle is now preparing for an NHL team to come, they're going to revamp the Seattle Center arena. And the neighborhoods and the developers jointly came forward and said, well, before we do this, we need to make sure that there's adequate public transportation. We need to increase the bus lanes in and around the Seattle Center. And then our initial estimate is it'll improve travel times by 5 to 7 minutes on each of those trips. The great thing is Metro didn't have to bring that forward. The developers brought that forward and said, if we're going to do this, we need to assure that we have city partnership to dedicate these lanes. And so I think that's a place where we just have to continue to think about where do we leverage our standing as critical infrastructure, even when we're considering selling off some of our infrastructure for a greater benefit.
So I see what Seattle can learn about fantastic hockey. We can learn about Amazon.
That's right. Exactly.
Joe, you want to add something to that?
I noted the long-term revenue stream in the challenge. The practice of the previous board had been to sell an asset and plug an operating deficit. So we, how long this policy shift will last, we have shifted to leases rather than sales. There are occasions when you have to sell a sliver of property and there's really no other use for it. And we have put into place a transaction. So we'll get lease payments, but we'll also get a transaction uplift if there is a sale of the lease among parties. We get a piece of that action. If there's a refinancing of it 10 years in or 15 years in, we get a piece of that action. So we have shifted to long-term revenue streams as opposed to sort of the one and done. We think that's more appropriate. Hopefully that policy will outlast us. We're done in 2020.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. I was going to say, there's so many threads that are just fantastic, because I think when we're talking about revenues and costs, it really is the heart of transit operations. So there's so many different things that we can cover here. I know I'm probably going to give more time for questions from the audience, if that's okay, than I think we were originally allowing. But I would like to open it up to the audience because I think there's so many great things that I'd love to hear from the audience and questions to the group. So I'm kind of looking at you, Art, only because you always seem to have the first question. But for others, you can always kick it off, warm them up.
Yeah, just to underscore, I think, what I'm hearing, David, among the many things you're doing on cutting edge, you took a RIF loan for your Eagle P3 Union Station project, and were able to pay it back like a 25-year loan in 7 years because of your success in value capture. So I just underscore that as a great success story. And then I hear Donna and Joe talking about the way you've taken a very important part of what we do, demand response service, but able to cut costs significantly just through a creative partnership with TNCs, a lesson worth underscoring. And Rob, of course, you got no less than the APTA Transit System of the Year, so that's the greatest honor of all. So all good things happening. I would like to maybe ask one maybe particular question, and that's on naming rights. And David, I know you have a story there. I think that's part of how we can earn money, and perhaps others might have a perspective on that question too.
Thanks, Art. So we embarked out on some naming rights maybe 6 or 7 years ago, talking to our board of directors about how we could go about leveraging the assets and seeing if we could get some sponsorship or naming rights and bring in revenue. So sensitive topic, right? These are public assets. Should they have a private name? Should they be sponsored, or should they remain public? So we took it to the board. Our board gave us some parameters around it. So like one of the assets we're not going to ever put a naming thing on is Union Station, for example. There's like, no, that's just too much of a public asset. But so we did go out for RFP. We brought in a vendor consultant to come in, help us kind of catalog all of our assets, try to put some framework of what the naming right values would be on those assets. And we've sold one, and it was a pretty good one, the very first one. So it's the line that we operate to the airport, which is the A line, but the University of Colorado bought the naming rights on that line. So everything about that line, we can't say A line, it has to be University of Colorado A line. All of our materials, everything is that. But it's a $5 million contract for 5 years, so almost $1 million a year just for the naming rights. And there's a few expenses around that we incur, but we net nearly $1 million a year on that, and then it has a 5-year option. Unfortunately, though, the group that we contracted with that contract has expired. They weren't interested in renewing, and we're also kind of wanting to take a fresh look at it anyway because we were only able to sell one asset in that whole time period. So we're getting ready to go out for another RFP for a naming rights consultant. The very first thing we'll do is kind of re-look at that inventory of assets and the values, because some of our board members said, well, we're not selling them because we've priced them too high. But then there's also a trade-off in there too about, you want to make sure if you're going to do something like that you do get some benefit and you're not just covering costs of administration and everything else. So it's an avenue we're looking at. We're getting ready to put out a request for proposals on digital advertising. I think I've talked to your vendor. Is it out front?
Yeah.
Yeah. They've come in and done a presentation. I was very impressed with what this particular organization is doing at a handful of transit properties with digital advertising. And so we're looking at doing the very same thing. Just bring them in. They cover all the infrastructure costs, pay for it out of revenue, and then hopefully we'll get a pretty good amount. We're going to approach that. We're going to separate it completely out from our network of public information. So the digital advertising will be solely for digital advertising, so we can try to hopefully maximize that revenue stream through that. So a couple things there. Thanks.
Well, with the MBTA, and we're about to undertake a major rebranding of the system, if you're really paying close attention to what's happening in Boston, we have been actually cryogenically putting Tom Brady into a seal in between games the last number of years. We fully expect him to last another 15 years and probably will be beating the Washington Amazonians in the Super Bowl about a decade from now. And so the B on MBTA will be the Massachusetts Brady Transportation Authority. We'll figure we'll get a lot of money from Robert Kraft and all those people. But no, we don't have any naming rights stuff. It would be, I think, a third rail for us to touch.
So it looks like we have a couple. I think we'll start over here.
Yes, I'm Gary Giovedetti. I'm on the board for San Joaquin Regional Transit District. I'd like Donna to touch on our relationship with Greyhound.
Sure. Greyhound was looking for a place to be, and there was a lot of resistance about letting them join us on. We have a downtown transit center. It takes up a whole block of downtown. We have 22 bus bays, a lot of space, police substation. It's a great space, but there was a lot of concern about letting Greyhound come on board, and I don't claim to have a lot of knowledge in this area. But when they first approached us, they were offering us very little money and demanding a lot. And we just said consistently, no, 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 we're not interested, we don't want to do this. But then they got into a place where they really needed a place to be, and they upped the offer. And so now they're paying us $250,000 to use a space at our downtown transit center 15 times a day. And with that $250,000, we were able to expand the customer service hours. So we're now able to keep our customer service center open later at night and on the weekends. And so that was something that benefited our whole community and all of our passengers. And really, it's turned out to be a pretty good partnership for us.
It's all about partnerships. Did you have a Greyhound story?
We're having that same conversation now. So is that
Hold out.
Is that $250,000 a year?
Yes.
Yeah. So we're having the same conversation with Greyhound now. They happen to own a whole square block in downtown Denver that's they want to sell and then move and locate somewhere else. And of course, they want to move into Denver Union Station. So, we're going through all of our capacity analysis and everything else. And when we did the redevelopment of Denver Union Station, Greyhound was offered to participate, chose not to. And now, yes, they want to come in, do a lot of things in Union Station. And of course, it's a very hard thing to value and price when you look at all the various impacts. So we're going through that conversation right now. It'll be interesting to see where it lands. And then the other piece of that we're having is, okay, you let one private sector operator into Denver Union Station. I feel compelled. We've got to open that up to other private operators. So we're probably going to do some kind of an RFP arrangement. But what we've really been struggling with is what does the pricing look like for other private operators? Is it a gate fee? Is it per trip? Is it so it's a challenging consideration.
I will say that we will not do any package processing. We didn't have the space. We thought that we weren't equipped for that. They wanted us to do package processing as well. We're opening our own Union transfer station soon in the south area of Stockton in January. And it will be a different kind of station. It'll be for one of our electrified bus rapid transit corridors. But it's in a really good location, and so we're looking forward to a partnership with Greyhound and Amtrak there as well. So, if they're willing to pay us $250,000, that's a lot of money for us. But we did hold out, and the offers got better and better and better.
Well, that's been our strategy. We're stalling.
And all they're really using is one space of our 22 bus bays, and they're not even using it permanently or all the time. We can still use it. So.
Good morning, Dave Stackrow, CDTA board member from Albany, New York. Rob, to you, after I very publicly promoted Terry to your job at the annual conference, I'm glad you're still here.
Yeah, I wrestled it away from him. Thank you.
Question to the panel. You've all touched on paratransit service. Donna, you specifically mentioned the level of service as a small percentage relative to the cost of the service. Each of you has different types of infrastructure. Boston has an aging infrastructure and older, and I mean by that the streets. So one of the struggles we have in Albany is that we have little control over sidewalks and curb cuts that would allow our customers in wheelchairs or customers that are blind to have better access to our regular fixed route service. They would love to have the independence of riding the fixed route service, but in many cases can't safely get to a bus stop where there's a shelter. Have you any success stories that you can share with how you've overcome some of that hurdle when in many cases we can't control that infrastructure to make it better?
I can give you a couple of examples. I mentioned that at first when we talked about running bus rapid transit service in Stockton, the city planners, the board of supervisors, everyone said, no, bus rapid transit won't work in Stockton, California. And one of the things that got the city on board at first is that we were putting new traffic signal controllers in for them because we have traffic preemption. But the other thing that we've done on our first and all 5 corridors is we do make accessible improvements part of the bus rapid transit corridor, and that's made it better for our customers to get on board. The second part, I don't know if it would work everywhere, but after we've made those accessible improvements, and we also design our routes to serve trip generators that we're very familiar with, both on our bus rapid transit stops and on our, what we have, a deviated fixed route service as well. We did a Freedom Pass. We have a couple different programs, but we offered a Freedom Pass, so every ADA certified customer now gets to wear, and they wear proudly their Freedom Pass, and they can ride any of the fixed route services at no cost. And so it almost sounds like a conflict. If you're ADA certified, how could you possibly ride fixed route services? But if you make it available and accessible enough and offer the option, we have looked at the ADA trips that were, for the people who have the Freedom Passes, their ADA trip usage has declined 40%. So we're providing a lot better mobility options for them and saving money again, and making accessible improvements along the corridor so people can get to the bus stops.
Other thoughts and comments about how working with your state roads and or city roads?
Yeah. It's challenging, but it's definitely a partnership with the local agencies. I think if there's anything positive happening right now is that I think most municipalities are realizing that these connections are critically important, and they're aware, and I think we're making progress towards making those connections. Of course, a lot of it comes down to funding and resources, but a couple of our major jurisdictions really see not just the need, but the benefit of making those connections. So I'm optimistic for the future in that realm.
Yeah, we've got obviously the city of Boston is our core, but then a series of communities that vary in terms of the wealth of those communities and their ability to fund capital improvements. This whole issue about having ADA compliant sidewalks, to keep them clean, to keep them shoveled, to have protection, is really a strain on their budgets, especially those that are at a smaller scale. We spend about $1 billion a year on capital. So one of the things we are in a current conversation with is, as part of an educational program, is try to understand what the barriers are for the local communities in terms of helping us to participate. And I think we're coming to believe that if we can set aside just a really small sliver of our capital, while it's almost like at the margins for us, we can get commitments from the local communities to in fact help solve these problems and make this issue a bit more solvable. We're probably about another year away from really rolling that out and making that as a policy commitment, but we're trying to use the power of our capital investment funds, which we're blessed to have, as a mechanism to figure out a solution with the local communities.
I just want to echo what Joe said. We have found that if we're going to do capital improvements in a neighborhood, in a small jurisdiction, if we just bring marginal amounts and say, well, now we can say that this is a transit use because if you improve the sidewalk, you're improving access to mobility. It is a huge win on many levels. The other thing I would say to David's point is the partnership with local jurisdictions is critical. We have the good fortune to have a good working relationship with the City of Seattle Department of Transportation. We also have the benefit of a massive lawsuit that was brought against the City of Seattle for not having adequate accessible curbs. So there's a massive effort right now to revamp the curb space to create greater access for people with mobility challenges.
We inherited a capital spend that was about $300 million a year when they thought they needed to spend for state of good repair backlog elimination at about $750 million a year. So in this past year, we've hit just close to $900 million, so we've tripled the amount over a very short period of time. We expect to be at about $1.2 billion in the next 18 months. So we have done that by really investing in the staff. We had just a terrible problem with human capital resource management. I mean, we had a very dispirited workforce. The best talent was leaving the capital delivery system in particular, particularly when you have a strong private sector economy. We were getting our best project managers, assistant project managers, and engineers picked off by the construction companies, et cetera, to go help build hotels and restaurants and all that stuff. So we have, we actually have a partnership with what's called the Massachusetts Competitive Partnership, which are the 50 biggest employers in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They're providing us multiple $1 million a year for investment in education programs for our project management staff on the capital side, for the procurement staff as well. And that has really helped retain people, it's helped accelerate folks. It has also helped with recruitment. We're giving folks free certifications in a partnership with the universities. We are also subsidizing MBA programs so folks can get used to thinking about how to project cash flow needs and all of that. So that's a really, really good story. And if you want to talk to Green Line Extension as an example, this was a project where a full funding grant agreement had been signed with the federal government declaring that the project was going to cost about $2 billion. That was in January of 2015. We came on board in July of 2015. In August of 2015, we get a presentation from the staff that said, oh, sorry, we think it's $3 billion. So a 50% increase. But what was worse than that, the $2 billion was really $1 billion of land assembly and a whole bunch of other soft costs right away. And the increase in cost was a doubling of the $1 billion of hard costs. The reason it all happened was because they had decided to use an alternative technique called Program Construction Manager, CMGC at Risk, which is a tool I've never used. I've been in the construction industry for half my life. And they picked a tool that they did not know how to manage. No one ever trained them how to manage it. They were so unsure about that tool that they picked a program management team and did not demand that people with that specific expertise be there, despite the fact that those firms had plenty of expertise. It was just it was just putting out a series of really good public sector folks in a position where they were going to fail, because the previous administration was thinking of acceleration, and nobody paid attention to the details. And despite the fact that there were countless memos from the staff to their superiors about we're not 100% sure what we're doing, those requests were unheeded. So there was a huge problem with underinvestment in the staff. We don't think we're perfect on it by any means, but the results that we're now getting, as Tom just mentioned, are really a function of a very heavy aggressive investment program. And the great thing about sort of our stakeholders, I'm sure all of you folks have the same thing, once we got public on it, it was amazing. Within 90 days, we had this offer. How about if we train you folks and we are able to spend the taxpayer money more efficiently? So it was really great that the private sector and the university system created a collaborative and helped us out of this mess.
I think we have time for one more question.
Yeah, I just had a question on advertising. With the digital advertising capabilities increasing and becoming even cheaper and then even quicker, how do we as an industry keep that lucrative but keep it tasteful?
That is a big problem, because we spent a lot of time on with upfront media, just getting into it, because once you get to video, there's all sorts of tasteless things you see on TV, and we're not sure we want to subject our folks to them. So we have a community council that screens things in advance and brings any concerns up to the general manager. We haven't really had any particular fights over it, so I think our vendor has been very respectful in not trying to maximize revenue by having certain things on the TV. Well, you know what's actually more lucrative than anything else is sharing with them what's happening in the community. So as an example, you're about to get a hockey team, a bunch of folks traveling on trains going to a hockey game, very different than the folks going to a Celtics game at the same venue. People going to Fenway Park, that changed the demographics. So we have integrated a database of every concert, every theater, every cultural event, et cetera, et cetera. We share that with Outfront Media. They understand who is going to be riding on the system. They are then able to target more specifically to those audiences. They can sell 15 minutes for a lot more money. We have, but we haven't turned it on. We're waiting for New York to turn it on first. So let's imagine a bunch of me and my peers. I'm an old Italian-American guy, took a bus trip to New York and stopped into one of the Outfront Media advertised stations there. There's actually a live provision. They could figure out that there's, 40 old guys just got off on a bus and are standing on the platform because they could read our iPhones. And I would imagine that Frank Sinatra compilation CD ad would probably come on, right? Because we'd be the only ones ever interested in that stuff. But their ability to target is really what is driving the revenue. I'm not sure they need to go to the distasteful stuff, but it's a concern, and you really have to have a community council engaged in this process.
And I would just add, as tight a policy as you can around the advertising. And that's a combination of working with the team and legal. And we recently, about a half a dozen years ago, went to commercial advertising only, so we're not dealing with some of the other kinds of controversial things that we've seen as an industry.
Yeah.
Follow up. Did you? Oh, thank you. Did any legal going the other way, saying this is free, but you're excluding us, so now we're going to sue you? Mm-hmm. Have you ran anything like that?
Well, that's one of the reasons we went with a commercial advertising only, was to kind of get out of that area with organizations and such that would say, hey, if you don't put my ad out, I'm going to sue, right? And that's really what they wanted, was the publicity out of the lawsuit.
Yeah, we got sued and we ended up adopting the same policy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
We're one of the few remaining large transit agencies that still has a limited public forum, and we are being sued as we speak. So.
Very good. Well, we could be talking about this all day. We also will be talking about this for generations, because this is everything that's going on now. There'll be the challenges of meeting revenue, controlling costs are never going to change. What's exciting, though, is the innovation and the partnerships and the other things that all of you have experienced and all of you are living every day. So thank you, panel, for coming out. Thank you, audience, for your questions.